Hello everybody and welcome to VCE Business Management Unit 2 Outcome 1, the summary, Communication in Business. This is the first outcome from Semester 2 of Year 11. Now I'm using some new software, so please bear with me with any technical glitches or any difficulty I have with any of these things. Now I'd like to, for this summary, I'm going to follow the same process which we did for the exam revision at the end of Semester 1, which is where first of all I'm going to create a mind map which covers all the main topics which are covered in the unit, and then have a page which breaks down each section. So onto the mind map. Now this is something you should be able to do yourself using paper once you're summarizing something for yourself as well. So remember, we just put the main topic in the middle. So this is communication in business. And then around that we're going to put all the main topics which we've covered. Now I'd recommend, if you know it might help you, just actually copying this and writing it down as we go through can be quite helpful. So you might want to think about doing that. Whatever works for you though. So that's our main topic, communication in business. Now when we talk about communication in business, first thing we've covered that really underpins all the other information that we've gone through is the three-step communication process. So this is a basic communication process. That's where the receiver sends an encoded message, the receiver decodes it, and then they send feedback to show what they've understood. Now, while I'm doing this, I'm going to shorten communication to comms. But when you do yours, I'd like you to actually, when you're writing in your exam and so forth, make sure you do use the full word communication. I'm allowed to use comms because it's just a summary I'm doing here. So the three-step comms process. After we looked at the three-step communication process, we then had a look at what makes communication effective. So how do you get the most out of your communication? And we also covered factors that can affect how a message is decoded. So that was related to how the different cultural factors and the mood of the receiver might affect communication. Now they're a bit similar to the barriers to communication, which is the last unit we did as well. So effective comms and also things that affect decoding. So I'm just going to put decoding for that one. Decoding. Okay, so I'm just going to pop in a couple of connectors here to our first two topics. Okay, now the next thing is the difference between internal and external communication for a business. So this is now where we're moving on to how businesses actually communicate rather than individuals. So it's internal, which is within internal stakeholders, and external as well. So internal, external, internal and external. And then we have two main sections for that, which is internal and external as well. Now, sorry, it's a little bit hard for me to talk while I'm moving these around, so you just have to bear with me a second. Now when we talk about internal communication, we're looking at the difference between upward, downward, and lateral communication. So if you remember, that's relative to the hierarchy of an organization. So upward communication is where an employee is talking to their boss, or somebody up the hierarchy, so their manager or something else. So yeah, upward, downward, and lateral. When it comes to external communication, we've got both business to business communication, and we also have business to the wider community. So Obviously, this internal, which we've looked at, is between a business's internal stakeholders, and external is from a business's internal stakeholders to external stakeholders. So business to business is things like your communication to your suppliers, your retailers or contractors, and then to the wider community is to your customers and media and the community in general. Now, after we've looked at that, we moved on to looking at the difference between the type of communication or the medium of communication, and that's where we split it into verbal and non-verbal communication. So there's a fair bit of a split here. So I'll go types of comms, and then there's verbal and non-verbal. Now, verbal communication, if you remember, is any communication that includes words, so that can be oral or written communication. Verbal doesn't just cover, in the textbook we use, verbal isn't just spoken communication. It can be letters and things like that as well. So make sure you remember that. When we talk about verbal communication, it's anything involving words. Non-verbal is anything that doesn't include words. Get in some joiners here. Okay, now, firstly with non-verbal communication, the main type of non-verbal communications we have include body language and visual imagery. So body language, we talked a bit about personal space and also hand and facial gestures. So hopefully, whoops, it's not going to be there. Hopefully you remember the YouTube video we've looked at, and there's also a link to that up on Moodle if you missed it. Gestures and space. Oh, sorry, I've got the wrong thing in here. It's actually body language here, which includes gestures and personal space. And secondly, there's also visual imagery, and that includes logos and the dress of your employees and things like that. So anything that's to do with pictures. Then verbal, there's two types. There's oral communication, which is anything spoken, so meetings, interviews, and lectures and so on. And there's written communication, which is letters, emails, opening hours, media releases, and that sort of thing. Now, I won't represent on here, but remember that any communication that includes both verbal and non-verbal could be called combination communication. Finally, with regards to types of communication, we also categorize them into formal and informal communication as well. So you remember that formal is anything that an organization, any communication channels that an organization has control over, and informal is obviously any communication channels that the business doesn't have control over. Now, everything that I've covered here so far on this mind map is in chapter 13 of your textbook. So that's all through chapter 13, and then finally we finished off with chapter 14 of your textbook, which is barriers to communication. So these are the things that get in the way of effective communication. There's quite a few different barriers to communication, so I won't put them on this big mind map, but we'll get into them into more detail when we get to that section of the explanation. So barriers to comms, and we also looked at ways to reduce barriers, so reducing barriers. Okay, now that's the first section of the explanation that's going to be used. There's going to be one for each section, each slide now. Oh, sorry, well, I should explain that better. There'll be one new section for each main topic. So there'll be one on the 3 steps comms process, there'll be one on effective communication, and one on types of communication and so on. So I'll leave this one here. That's the overview of everything that we covered in the unit. Hopefully that's helpful for you, and I'll see you in the next video.